Please welcome to the stage Vanessa Chisholm, Dole Caregiver Fellow, Harish Emege, President and CEO, BCG Federal, Ali Madad, Founder, GiveCare, and DeMartio Sen, OpenAI.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Marvell Adams Jr. I serve as CEO of the Caregiver Action Network, and I'll be your moderator today. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So, caregiving is one of our most essential systems in our country, and one of the least supported, unfortunately. At the same time, we're seeing an explosion of technology and AI entering the space. Some of it is promising, and some of it is just noise. So the question I want to sit with today is, are we building solutions that actually work for caregivers, or are we adding more complexity to an already fragmented system? My goal for our conversation today is to stay grounded in what's real, what's trusted, and what is going to actually scale solutions that show up in people's daily lives. So I'll do some introductions of our lovely panel today. Mateo Sen is a member of OpenAI's government GTM team, LeaderStat, and partners at leads strategic partnerships across federal and international government. Vanessa Chisholm is a Elizabeth Dole Foundation Fellow. Got a fan club, I like it. It's always good, checks in the mail. Vanessa Chisholm is a caregiver and a fellow of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, bringing lived experience into this conversation in a way that keeps us grounded in what caregiving actually looks and feels like day to day. Welcome, Vanessa. Harish Emege leads our federal work at BCG, where he's focused on large-scale systems, how policy, infrastructure, and innovation come together, and where they often don't. And Ali Madad from GiveCare Invisible Bench. Ali is the founder of GiveCare and GiveCare Labs and the creator of Invisible Bench, a framework for evaluating caregiving AI across safety, compliance, trauma-informed design, and real-world readiness. So as you can see, we have a really amazing panel this morning, and looking forward to this powerful mix of perspectives, whether it's technology, policy, lived experience, and evaluation. So I'd love to start by asking each of you this question. What problem are you personally trying to solve for caregivers right now? Vanessa, I'll start with you.
For me, I would like caregivers to not be invisible, and that means not just on the care team. Of course, we need inclusive care, but also in society and in professional settings. Caregivers bring a lot to the table, and I think it's often overlooked.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much.
For me, it's really about ease of access to services. People have earned the right to be able to get their prescription medications, to get care, to get disability benefits, and we should make it as easy and seamless as possible to do so. It shouldn't require heroics from VA employees to be able to meet those needs. The system should, and the design should be such that individuals can be able to get those services and caregivers don't have to go above and beyond to support their veterans.
As a caregiver of 7 years, I was deeply motivated to solve my own problem, and in trying to build something GiveCare, I was acutely aware of the challenges posed with working with AI, and so I shifted gears, doing both at the same time, but deeply invested in the question of how to make AI safe for the caregiving relationship.
Well, first, thank you all for having us, and really excited. I'm just going to follow on with my fellow panelists. When it comes to what we're trying to reduce is the invisible burden when it comes to caregiving. So much cognitive load that comes along with caregiving when it's navigating care, paperwork, procedures, whatever it may be. As the wife of a nurse, as a husband of a nurse, as someone who has been part of caregiving teams in the past for family members, it's just a matter of making it easier to do what you're there for, which is loving and caregiving for the ones that you're there for. So we're just trying to make sure that we're using technology to reduce the things that people can't see, but that comes up every single day.
Wow, great. And love to hear the theme around making caregivers more visible and ensuring that the things that they're engaging with are really going to be useful to them. So, in kind of continuing, this morning you heard about the National Blueprint for Action, 136 evidence-based recommendations built by this community. This panel has a chance to really pressure test some of those recommendations against reality. So let's try to separate signal from noise. Armante, I'll start with you. From where you sit, what are you seeing actually stick in the real world versus what just sounds like a good demo?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick raise of hands. Who's used ChatGPT in the past? All right, that's a good amount of folks. There's a lot of hype and noise around what AI can do. We've been promised a lot, and if you think about where AI can go, it's almost like a futuristic utopia of a world. What we're trying to focus on is what's the recurring, everyday kind of tasks that come up that you can just apply AI to, that allows you to do the very human things, which is connecting to people, which is allowing you to really focus on what really the matters at hand instead of having to navigate bureaucracy, jump through a bunch of different hoops, just to give ultimately what you're there for, which is care. So what we've seen stick really well is two things. One is any sort of repetitive, kind of monotonous work that can be done that you can task an AI with, and that could be as simple as uploading a couple of forms to ChatGPT and saying, "Can you fill it out for me and help me with this?" All the way to now we're getting to this, another buzzword, but agentic workflow where you can start delegating that, where you can start tasking that with an AI agent that you can put at work, but then focus your time on making sure you're doing things that AI couldn't do, which is getting your kids ready for school, or making sure you're getting ready for a trip that's coming up, and all the kind of obstacles you have to think about when when any sort of kind of event comes up in life. And so when we're showing off our technology, we're a big show don't tell culture in terms of what our technology can do. It's really not showing the pie in the sky, like what's the greatest thing you can do with this PhD level intelligence. It's really, here's a couple of forms, here's how I can fill it out, here's how I can help you plan an itinerary, and really start taking away the ankle biter problems, because then it frees that cognitive load of what you can do every single day.
Yeah, and just in a follow-up on that, I think the other day I saw a washer dryer that had Wi-Fi connectivity and maybe not AI quite yet, but where are organizations overestimating this readiness for AI?
That's a great question. I think when any sort of leader is told, "Hey, AI can really fundamentally change the way the organization works," they tend to jump to the hardest problem. Which is, oh, great, there's this really gnarly problem I want to throw it at. Let's start there. I think the magic is actually in figuring out what's bothering you in the littlest of ways and then starting to apply it there. Both from an organizational standpoint, it's what we think about top down and then bottoms up. So top down is, how can we fundamentally change the organization? How can we rethink our processes and our workflows? But the bottoms up is really where it matters, where employees every single day are running into the same problems, and they're the ones kind of using their domain expertise and their knowledge and leveraging the technology to apply it to that problem. I think that's actually the most important way, and that's why we have on the kind of work side close to 8 million users using the ChatGPT for Work kind of suite, but almost 1 billion people around the world using it on a weekly basis to help them navigate all of these small little things. So the power is in using your own domain expertise, and that's not necessarily just professional, right? It's also how what your kids like, what your spouse is like, what they don't like, what kind of trips you want to go on, all of that into leveraging how you can use it every single day. The last thing I'll end with is so much of this technology is about meeting you where you're at, and then being able to take it from there. And so we've been able to see a huge spread of people across the world in different languages, in different modes and mediums, being able to leverage this technology to get where they want to go and what they want to achieve.
Yeah, thanks so much. Vanessa, I'm going to go to you next. From a caregiver's perspective, the robots aren't here yet to help with that role of a caregiver, nor do many caregivers want that type of functionality. But what actually feels different today because of technology?
So I began caregiving in 2009, so a lot has changed since then. I remember being in Walter Reed with my pen and notebook and taking all the notes, and care back then was a lot of phone coordination to make appointments. You had to go in person, and now it has really shifted to we have access to telehealth. We have access to My Healthy Vet, where we're able to directly message our providers. It also opens up online support communities are now available that weren't previously. So we have EDF Connect. If you're not on there, you should be caregivers. And you're able to really create an online community for support and get resources. Also, I would say from a professional standpoint, things have changed along the lines of remote work. I've really been able to ensure financial stability for my family because of technology, and being able to work remotely has been a great asset to that.
So if I heard you correctly, it allows you to do both your full-time job as a caregiver and a full-time job professionally,
Yes.
more efficiently.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
absolutely. And I would say too, like for us, our home is actually a smart home. We use cameras. With our situation, my husband needs supervision 24 hours. He has seizures. And so we use cameras, we were laughing backstage, Alexas. I have a skylight calendar, and my new favorite device is called a Medicube. It actually sends me a text message. You pre-fill it with medication, it distributes the medication. If it's not taken, when things are running low, it texts me and emails me. So I know when things need to be done.
Wow, that was called a Medicube?
It's called a Medicube. Yeah,
right.
the VA will pay for it. Yes.
Well, I mean, so in that same line of thinking, so are there things that feel still just as hard before innovation kind of entered the chat?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It's the humanity of it all. It's very difficult. This one always gets me. My husband and I we've known each other since we were 12 years old. Wow. And so the human aspect of it. It takes a lot to care for someone who you love deeply, and to make that decision is very difficult, and to make the sacrifices, and that can never be replaced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, we're humans supporting humans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. Haresh, I'll go to you next. So, in thinking of a systems level, where is innovation aligning with policy, and where is it maybe outpacing it?
I think it is natural, given the exponential pace of growth of technology, that it will move first before any federal agencies or government are ready to adopt it. But to me, the commercial industry being able to prove out what works, and then government being a fast follower as trust is built. And I'll be very candid, when I heard about AI, I was very scared. I really was. And as I learned more and I certainly started digging in, I kind of came to realize if I got my prescription medications at CVS and I got a reminder text, AI powered that. When my flight was delayed at United Airlines, and then they gave me a lot of information about, oh, here's the weather delay, here's the pattern coming through, this is what you can expect, this is the latest information we have. AI powers that. And so as much as I can be scared about some elements, I'm also extremely excited. And I believe nothing passes the physical toll that caregivers have to bear, except for the mental load. The mental load that they have to carry is so high that if technology can play a role to send you a reminder when the prescription is due, when you no longer have a refill but you have to go in, make that easy for you. Make it so that all of the care plans are synthesized in plain English. And that is the promise that we're starting to see commercial industry start to deploy in our day-to-day lives. And I think as trust is built, comfort is built, then you'll start to see that then in the government services that you actually receive.
Yeah. So in that same thinking then, what is being built right now that the system isn't ready to absorb, that's out there in process, maybe not ready for prime time, but almost there, and the system is really not ready for it?
Yeah. If I break it into three big buckets of value. The first around operational efficiency of how the government delivers services for you. That is getting readily deployed to make it so that processing paperwork, Secretary Collins spoke about the digitization of the disability claims and how it's accelerated the process. That's insanely valuable. It makes your life better. It's seamless. You don't experience it, and that's the best way you can have it. That's kind of in motion. The next set around improving the quality of care you receive. Being able to use AI tools to be able to diagnose or identify potential outliers in your scans, so radiologists being able to get a second look to point them to where to focus attention. That's kind of in motion, kind of piloting, getting proven out. I think the last step around veteran-facing, caregiver-facing, citizen-facing services, that's where we're going to see the most shift. You'll get the most value from, but that trust piece needs to be established first. That people understand that the risk associated gets outweighed by the value that can get created, and that there are proven models, commercial technology that can be able to then actually solve for those risks, minimize them, and ensure that you get the maximum value. So I see it kind of in those three phases. Mm-hmm. The first one already kind of in motion, the second one in kind of pilot, and then the third one on its way.
Got it. And I heard you mention trust, which takes us to Ali in this next question. What we hear from caregivers many times is that, or individuals in general, that they don't trust this technology or AI, and sometimes it has to do with safety. Could you spend a little bit of time talking to us about what we are not measuring that we should be when it comes to evaluation of AI tools?
Yeah. I mean, I think we first have to start with care as a relationship. It's a relationship between you and your care recipient and maybe the larger care team, and there's no space that AI replaces any one of those pieces. AI can be connective tissue across and within and amongst that, and safety is the ceiling, right? Safety is the floor, it's not the ceiling. And so that's, I think, the starting point, right? Like, caregivers want to, access the tools available to them. They are their patient advocates as well, right, for their care recipients. So I see a lot of caregivers reaching out to AI tools and trying to find the ways in which to use them. And the tool that I built, the benchmark Invisible Bench, aims to measure the things that you don't see within clinical benchmarks, right? It's not medical AI, and it's not mental health, purely mental health AI. So there are those two distinct domains emerging, and caregiving lives somewhere in this in-between space, just like caregivers everywhere, kind of forgotten, invisible, just below the surface. And I think part of the role of AI can do is help them be more legible. The system's more legible to them, and them more aware of how they can navigate, what they can do to minimize tasks, but then also maintain healthy boundaries, right? Maintaining those safe boundaries, whether it's making sure that they don't veer off into medical clinical diagnoses, which is a specialized task, or into more relational violations, right? I think we've all seen, read, and heard about conversations that can lead to kind of false intimacy that you can create and forge between yourself and an AI. And I think it's important to have some kind of guardrails around some of those things.
Yeah. I mean, in hearing you talk about that, it gives me this sense that you can have a lot of functionality, but not necessarily that there is readiness along with that functionality. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, capability is what is possible, right? And I think there's an important distinction to be made between the kind of engine driving it, the model, and those get better every day at an alarmingly fast rate. And what developers need to do, right, is put the kind of whole scaffold of the car around it. How do they create something that can take advantage, right, of all of the benefits that these models provide, while taking into full consideration what is appropriate for a caregiver? And I think I'll mention two things. One is, I feel like we're probably in the 1950s era of automobile safety, pre-seatbelt era. And I think what's unique about the caregiver relationship is you're not just the driver, you're concerned about the passenger. And that dyadic relationship in the exchanges that you're having with an AI are something that are just kind of, again, just falls between the cracks right now.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with you a little bit longer because there's this kind of this thinking of that in caregiving, almost right is never going to be good enough. So, something that is 80 or 85% correct, and maybe that's why you don't hear about AI in airplanes, is that, there's a safety factor. And could you talk a little bit about what does safe enough to use actually mean in caregiving AI?
Yeah. I'll share an anecdote. One of my early pilots and tests I did, I had a caregiver use the service, which is over SMS, to vent, to share the kind of guilt and outrage that she personally experienced and felt. And she felt that was, a safe space to do that. Caregivers feel all sorts of things that don't make them feel very good about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think that's one small example of, providing the space, but then providing the right sort of recourse, right, around it. So this is one of those things, the technology is here, the AI is here, and caregivers are very often put in a desperate situation, right? It's often a kind of paralysis where they don't reach out to help, they don't accept the help that comes to them, and so they'll often turn to channels like, something with AI at 2 a.m. And so ensuring, right, that we have the right sort of guidelines and guardrails around those things, I think is the key.
So, and just to follow up on that one, when thinking of those guardrails and guidelines, as a caregiver looking at AI, what should I be aware of that's a red flag, that I really should be looking out for to make sure that I'm not in a space where this really isn't for me, or I should be concerned with perhaps the engagement I'm having?
Yeah, I think we're in a time now where all of the people making these tools should be evaluating and sharing those evaluations, where things stand on benchmarks. So we're getting to a level of kind of transparency around the performance of these tools and of services. We're not quite there yet, but I think that's what we should be working towards. And I think that'll get us a long way there.
Thanks. Actually, I was not going to ask this question because I was nervous about it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What if we get it wrong? What are the consequences of getting it wrong?
I think we see some of that already. So I think we can talk about it in terms of the absence of that, which is, what we may have seen prior to AI, which, it's not there. And with AI, we're seeing all sorts of things that we may not have been aware of before. And so it's hard to say, I think, really, what it could be. The risks are there, right? Like, one small risk is, I couldn't say small, but if you are not seen or heard from a cultural perspective in the conversation you're having, you may just tune out, right? Mm-hmm. So there's also a trust issue that'll come up with as well if, like, you're given information that doesn't meet your expectations, or again, like I'm avoiding clinical medical types of boundaries as well.
Got it. Thank you. So this next question is for Armateo. So in your time working with OpenAI, so from a deployment standpoint, how are organizations thinking about risk, and where are they perhaps underestimating risk?
Yeah, I think we all remember the ChatGPT moment when this thing kind of came around. People were starting to talk to it and use it. And that's led to a big kind of consumer wave, right, of people using it in their own way, using it in their own emails, with their own personal emails and so on and so forth. And then we start seeing saw this inflection point in late 23, early 24, where people were starting to bring this into work. And so for organizations, it was a matter of figuring out how can we provide an option that is sanctioned, that is within our boundaries, that keeps our data safe, that also then splits up how you're using it in your personal life versus your work life. And so what we've started seeing organizations do is really lean into providing access, and that in their own way is providing in a enterprise format or version. But paired with that, more importantly, is how to use it. So much of it was consumers learning how to use it themselves, but now we're seeing organizations lean into that and sharing that AI will be present in your both personal and professional life, and we'd like to lean in and show you how you can use it in a safe, secure, responsible manner, both at work, but also on your own account and your own time, how you can use this at home. And we've seen that have an immense impact on how organizations are also building trust with their employees. It's actually brought to light a lot of the discrepancies or things that may have been invisible before, especially when it comes to caregiving. A lot of the stories that I've heard at organizations is actually the way I was using this was at home was caregiving or taking care of X, Y, and Z. And I have brought that to work because the same kind of cognitive load that I carry in my personal life that bleeds into my professional life, I actually can do a better job to bring balance, as Vanessa's talked about, whether it be work from home or also just reducing that kind of invisibility around it. And so the way that we are trying to lean in with that is both both on the work side, providing trainings for any of our enterprise customers, and that leads into how we've been working with federal agencies like the VA and like HHS. On the other side of it, though, is our AI literacy efforts around our organization called OpenAI Academy. And it's really not just providing access, but also equitable access. And so for us, that's looking like, we did 2 what we call jams, is where we across 10 different cities or so, we bring across different representatives from a certain industry. So we did one with nonprofits, and so getting them the ability to understand how can they better deliver their mission, how can they better handle case management, how can they kind of deliver using AI deliver the best results for what their nonprofit stands for, and then also with scientists. So we went across all the national labs in the United States, and we gave access to our most advanced technology, and it was helping them kind of solve novel science problems, whether it be in the healthcare space, energy space, national security space. And so those are just some of the ways is that access is one part of it, but pairing that with enablement, training, the confidence of being able to use this in a responsible manner is what we're seeing the real uptick.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing what you talk about, the jams you said, and it sounds like you're essentially going to where the users are. We talk about sometimes meeting caregivers where they are. Vanessa, I'd be curious to hear from you. When we talk about these kinds of tools, what would make you, in your caregiving role, trust or rely upon a tool in this way?
So first and foremost, I think it has to be easy. Like, we are generally overwhelmed in our day-to-day lives, and we're dealing with a lot of, if you have a family, you're dealing with your family, plus your care recipient, all the things. It needs to be easy, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be consistent and reliable. So those are the factors I would look for to trust something, yes.
Yeah.
And also the understanding of that it is technology, and to always verify the information. Maybe if you're going to ChatGPT or wherever to look for an answer to something, follow up with your doctor and make sure that that is accurate.
Yeah, so AI powered but human validated.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we heard this morning that the blueprint specifically calls for caregiver voice in the design of these tools. So, Vanessa, in your experience, where has that happened, and where is it still missing? Do you see that human voice in design as a user experience, and if so, where have you seen it, and maybe where is it missing?
So I would say that I think, in my experience, I haven't seen it really very often that the caregivers are included. I think caregivers need to be at the forefront, not an afterthought, and they need to be at the very beginning of designing. You can have work groups and teams. I mean, there's lots of ways to incorporate caregivers. I know the Dole Fellows, they love to put their input in. So you have a group of willing participants in order to ensure that our needs are being met with these tools.
Yeah. It's been interesting. We've had at Caregiver Action Network a few calls and engaged with AI companies, and there's clearly an interest in understanding how that voice gets infused, and but also clearly an indication that maybe the voice isn't there as strong as it needs to be yet, and how do you infuse it? So.
Yeah.
So Haresh, I'm going to go to you next. So what role should policy or government play in setting some of the guardrails that we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important from a standpoint around data security, making sure that as you input information, it's maintained in a way that doesn't get leaked out, making sure that the accuracy of what you're getting is very high, and ensuring that what decisions you make and the information it feeds you allows you to make the best actions as an individual. But many times that gets used as a reason for inaction, and I would say there is both an imperative to trust and ensure that the sanctity of information is protected and resources, but there is also a moral imperative to delivering the best possible services for citizens. And to me, where that line starts to shift is as you start to see world-class companies who are subject to a lot of the same types of expectations, whether it's HIPAA or for the healthcare providers, or financial services companies and banks who are also heavily regulated, as they test, deploy, scale these technologies, I think there's also a desire to make sure that citizens can also benefit from them. And making sure that the government, and as it relates to prohibitions around using some of these technologies, as it gets proven out, as people can trust it, especially with proven platforms that have the appropriate ways to vet how information is controlled and carried, so that you don't have cyber attacks, et cetera. Making sure that those services then become available to deliver for citizens.
Yeah, I mean, all these tools are so customizable. I mean, they're innately flexible, and so how do you then look in that environment and figure out what standards need to be in place versus the flexibility that is really drawing people towards the tools?
Yeah, that's a great point. The beauty with a lot of the platforms is that the security pieces many times are built into the platforms themselves, which is very, very different than 5 years ago, where people were doing custom development of individual softwares that each one had their own idiosyncrasies. Like having the fundamental platform that's built underneath gives a level of security. Then it's about building on top of it for the use cases that are there. But VA with its Community Care Next Gen coming up contract, there's going to be a lot of great access with community care providers to be able to allow veterans and their caregivers to be able to access those services, which I think is really a wonderful thing. But then that's where data standards have to come in. How do you ensure that caregivers don't have to bear another extra load when information is getting transferred from VA medical facilities to the community care providers, ensuring that the standards of quality metrics are consistent across all of them, and that from a VA standpoint, as a citizen standpoint, that VA is in a position to hold them accountable to delivering the quality of service that you depend on. So to me, that's a place where standards can be very important and critical, so that people meet some base level of quality, as long as that kind of gets built on safe platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I'm hearing a theme here around the necessity of gaining that trust, keeping that trust, because I would imagine losing it does not mean the next day you try again, and also recognizing the role that policy and government can play in making those standards that can underpin that trust. In thinking about kind of the access to these types of tools, innovation really only works if it reaches the people who need it most. And that's not a given. You still have parts of this country where broadband access is not a given. 5G is not a given. And so, each of these tools run on well, we won't get into data, but they run on, a fair amount of bandwidth. So Vanessa, I'll start with you on this. who is most at risk of being left out of this wave of innovation, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think it's who has barriers now with access to care. It's going to be people who live in rural communities. It's going to be low-income individuals who don't have access to the internet where they're located at. It's going to be the families who are maybe older generation, who don't understand technology and who aren't really equipped with the knowledge. But I'm a firm believer in it's teachable moments, and everyone can learn. So there's a great opportunity for us to teach them and to reduce those barriers, really.
Yeah. I mean, you've highlighted, a few different groups that historically are kind of left on the sidelines when it comes to innovation, perhaps. And so, from your perspective, what does that inclusion actually look like from a caregiver's day-to-day reality?
Well, inclusion, that word. So I would say I think caregivers, again, need to be removed from the sideline. They need to be put, and not just in the medical world of the VA and the doctor's appointments, but also in the professional realm, because as I'm sure you know this, caregivers bring so many different aspects to the professional world that could really benefit your organization, your company. We really tend to be go-getters. We tend to be able to navigate. Crisis management is our thing. So we're really able to assist corporations with growing, and I'm fortunate I've been able to lead nationwide programming and for military families, caregivers, and veterans. And so it's been great to see that access to care, for them and the resource sharing.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head in the sense of individuals in the workplace that are working caregivers, and quite frankly, they're probably some of your best individuals in the organization. And so it's understanding and retaining those individuals. Armentea, I'm going to switch to you and just ask a little bit about what does it take to design and deploy tools that don't just serve the most resourced users, and so being able to continue to bring other people into the tent?
Yeah, I think a large part of it is not just about design; it's also about deployment. Design is definitely a part of it, and I think our mission is that it should benefit all of humanity, not just the most well resourced. And a lot of that just goes back to the history of how OpenAI started, but then how we've thought about deploying our technology. And it's very intentional if you look at the areas that we've deployed it first. And so, at our core, we're very much a research lab. And these researchers, there's only a couple hundred in the world that are really thinking about and are able to deliver this technology. They deeply care about where this technology can be deployed and impacted. And so very early on, I'm speaking from my personal experience and tenure at OpenAI, it was not just looking at enterprises and businesses and like where it could be, but within that it was looking at healthcare, it was looking at education. And so some of our earliest partnerships were in the healthcare space with Moderna. And it was thinking about not just bringing around internal operational efficiencies. The way that their head of AI at that time talked about it was the ability for the metric that we use when we're deploying your technology is how many lives can we save. And that's just because it can accelerate their kind of medical research, their research on drug development, and it just quickens the way they can get it out to market so that it can be deployed in a way that is then accessible to the greater population. The other piece is education. I think about Vanessa's comment around those demographics that are typically on the sidelines and left behind. Almost always, the first step that you can really meaningfully change a person's life is in an educational system. It's not just also in like the private institutions. It's in public education. It's in community colleges. It's in K through 12 institutions. And so the way we approached that was we wanted to think about how can we meet the youngest generation where they're at, and how can we do this in a safe way. So we worked with campus administration, professors, provosts, presidents, and students to understand how they could use it and not use it. We even deliberately held it back in K through 12 to make sure that we weren't deploying it to kids under 18s, because child safety is a huge part of how we think about deploying our technology responsibly. And so if you look at just and it's all public, and I invite everyone to do so, if you just look at the way we've deployed our technology, it's been very intentional in terms of, as best as we can, in terms of giving people the trust that they can make the decisions on their own for how they use the technology. We've made concerted efforts in these areas where we think there's going to be a large impact, a beneficial impact on not just general population, but how we can empower enterprises to serve their target population as best as possible.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ali, I want to come back to you and ask just around, how do you build evaluation frameworks that account for the culture, sometimes the trauma, and the real world context that just goes into being a human?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key for me, was to take a step back from building a service or a tool and to look at more holistically the kind of failure modes, the areas that were lacking, and some of those were trauma-informed, some of those were cultural and belonging, so that when caregivers message a service, they can see themselves or not feel excluded or feel stereotyped. And so in Visible Bench, the benchmark, there are a good handful of conversations that are pulled out that kind of demonstrate the areas and these gaps that are kind of built into the models. And ultimately it comes down to, one part, a data curation problem. It can't represent the totality of humanity, and that's just a fundamental problem. And then that's followed by, how do you then kind of redress that in a way that's useful and usable? So for me, the first part was really highlighting the kind of cracks that you could see, the fissures that would generally invisible, because I think what's important to note is the benchmarks that exist out there, the way models advanced, have typically been on verifiable domains like math, science, engineering, and then they kind of extend into more softer subjective domains now. You need something to be measurable in a way that you can then feed back in for further training or reclassification. And all of these things are softer and harder to kind of catch. And so that's why it's kind of critical to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. So just switching gears around scaling as we wrap things up here. So Haresh, I'd be curious to hear, in the blueprint and in Care 2030 that I'll be talking about later on, it's really trying to understand and share roadmaps, and so that the silos start to get broken down and that pathways are clearer. Could you talk a little bit about what would it take for us to move from innovation to actual infrastructure?
No, that's a great question. And I think those silos around design and making sure that caregivers are involved in the design, making sure that technology partners are actually working together to be able to derive solutions. And then the limit is just imagination. Because the tools exist, the safety exists in many places and will continue to get proven out and refined over time. The ChatGPT moment was like 1,300 days ago. And if it were even a year ago, I would have said, I think the trust is a part of the problem. I don't know about the model. But again, exponential growth in the improvement and the quality of what they've done, that's not the constraint anymore. The constraint is actually the imagination and the partnership of everyone to be able to make sure that their voices and needs get met, and working with government hand in hand to deliver those.
Thank you. So as we wrap things up, I just want to do kind of a rapid fire question for each of you. And I'll start with you, Vanessa, and we'll just go down the line here. So what is one thing we need to do in the next 12 months to meaningfully improve the lives of caregivers?
I only get one thing. You need to let caregivers in the room. That's what needs to happen. I think caregivers need to be included across all spectrums. Yeah.
Yes.
And trust them and understand their strengths. I think
Trust them and understand their strengths.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. What do we need to do in the next 12 months?
It's going to sound very boring,
it's okay.
but I think many caregivers I've spoken with have talked about the pain point of having to borrow the veterans' logins to be able to access basic services. And with two-factor authentication and increasing complexity associated with identity management, and caregivers aren't always together with the veteran they care for. And the underlying technology and the investments that the new VA leadership have made to accelerate the Oracle Health rollout, big props to them for that. It was a big move. Being able to actually show that the technology is actually capable now of allowing for caregiver logins and making sure that as that starts to get built into the future, so that there is potential for caregivers to be able to support that. And I think it's really more of a matter of time when that happens, but I would love to see that as something that VA continues to prioritize, because they've got a lot of big priorities. They have a lot of impact that they've done. I'd love to see that as one of the things that they really lean in on to ensure that caregivers are seen, they have direct access to support veterans, and they can benefit from all these technological innovations that continue to expand.
Great. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Ali.
Yeah, I think we need a national standard on caregiving AI. I think the folks in this room, the folks that are, part of other caregiving coalitions should, be part of a larger coalition to help forge a standard. There's a patchwork of legislation popping up across states that are trying to kind of govern therapy-adjacent chatbots, mental health chatbots, but I think caregiving AI is still such a unique and differentiated piece that needs a much larger and broader and more concerted effort and focus.
I'll wrap us up. Something that came to mind when you talked about how we're in the 50s of safety, and was that Secretary Dole was a big part of instituting or advocating for airbags in vehicles, and that's a huge part of. There's the parallel there, and so I'll bring it into three ways. Starting with that is bringing government, industry, and community together, and within that community, having caregivers lead the community piece of it is number one, is what we need. Second is continue to give broad access, especially in rural areas or to demographics that may not be able to access this through their own means. And then third is access to equitable training, education, and support on how to leverage this in a responsible, safe manner. So those three things together is where I can see a lot of progress being made in the next 12 months.
Wow, wow. Well, I mean, we've just really covered the whole gamut of this subject, but really thank you guys for being here, because it's clear that the innovation that we see in caregiving, there's a lot going on. It's fragmented at times, it's not as coordinated as we'd like to. We're looking for alignment, we're looking for trust, and we're looking for systems and infrastructure that can make this an actual thing as opposed to something that's fragmented. So, because caregivers really, they need more than tools. They need a system in order to engage with. So thank you so much for lending your voices today. Appreciate you. Round of applause for our participants.